The Bears already make a change at offensive coordinator. Woo! The heat is on Caleb now to show him what he can do. We'll talk about it today on Locked On NFL.
The barbershop is open and Tony Wiggins has a chair for you. He's ready with some real NFL talk. The local experts of Locked On bring their expertise, and Wiggy is ready with his clippers and shears. Sit down and enjoy. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, what up, what up? Welcome to Locked On NFL, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with the help of our local experts that know your teams like no one else. I'm the host, the barber, Tony Wiggins, joined today by Locked On NFL expert Kevin Oestreicher. All right, man, look, this is what we're going to talk about on today's show. We got a busy show. More mess in Dallas. That's where we're going to park it at the end, right in the middle. Tua and the Dolphins win in L.A., and then the Bears make a change. That's what we're going to talk about up front. My man Caleb Williams doing his thing, maybe doing his thing a little bit too much. All right, so today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Ultimate Football GM. That's right, Ultimate Football GM, man. The game is back. Let me tell you how to play it. What you need to do is go over to Ultimate GM and use the promo code Locked On NFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free bonus to boost your franchise. All right, Striker, man, we're going to get right to it, man. The Bears, we thought last year it was all on Justin Fields. Turns out it wasn't. Luke Getsy gets the job. A lot of people are kind of ho-hum about that. Well, it didn't even last a little bit more than half a season because now Luke Getsy's gone and they have to start all over. I think they're cutting it short. They need to probably fire some more people in Chicago.
Yeah, there are a lot of teams that need to fire their head coach going into the offseason. Chicago was most certainly one of them. Probably maybe at the top of the list. Maybe Jacksonville is a little bit ahead of them. I know you know about that.
Ooh.
But in Chicago, it feels like this was a move that should have happened last offseason. But you and I have talked about it, Wig, where it's like the timeline for coaches compared to the timeline for young quarterbacks is so different. And now there were rumblings about, Chicago going to bench Caleb Williams and put old Tyler B in there. And I'm just like, I don't think that's a great idea. Now they're not actually doing it. You know,
they better not do it.
Caleb Williams. But what kind of message does that send if there are even conversations about that right now? So it was always going to be difficult because, Eberflus is not like a quarterback guy, not like, and I think a lot of people, when they were in the draft process, it was, what if Caleb falls to 2 when he goes to Washington with Kingsbury, and how would that look? And obviously we see Jaden Daniels over there in Washington absolutely killing it in rookie of the year conversation, even some MVP talks for him. But it's all about situation too, where sometimes your situation just isn't great. In Chicago and out there, and they got Keenan Allen, and they brought in DJ Moore last year, and they signed DeAndre Swift and draft Rome Odunze, and it's still not enough because I think it goes so much further than the players. I think this is majorly a coaching issue, and it needs to change.
You're right. It's all about structure. No better person to hear about that from than Lauren Cox of Locked On Bears.
The Chicago Bears fired offensive coordinator Shane Waldron. And now head coach Matt Eberflus only has one hope to save his job. I'm Lauren Cox, host of the Locked On Bears podcast. And the firing of offensive coordinator Shane Waldron may have dug Matt Eberflus's own grave, but there's one chance he has to keep that job this year. And it all depends on what the interim offensive coordinator Thomas Brown does in Shane Waldron's place. This organization is not going to let Matt Eberflus hire a third offensive coordinator next offseason. If this change to Thomas Brown doesn't fix the Bears offense, Matt Eberflus is done. His entire job security is dependent on what this new offensive coordinator does, and if he can be the guy to bring back next year as the OC, because he's not picking a new one from outside the organization.
He ain't picking no new coordinators. As a matter of fact, he won't even be there next year, if you ask me. I think Ryan Poles is going to do what a lot of people thought he should have done this past off season, and that is provide a really good defensive coordinator for somebody who needs one, and they're going to pluck up Matt Eberflus because he's going to be available. They're going to get rid of him in Chicago and start all over. And I'm already hearing Cliff Kingsbury because of what he's done in Washington, and of course we have been hearing for weeks. Everybody from Detroit, everybody wants the Detroit offensive coordinator, and rightfully so. The Bears may have some people they got to beat to the punch for Ben Johnson, and Ben Johnson's gonna probably pick the best scenario and situation. So I'm gonna put you in it right. I'm gonna ask you just flat out right now. Who is the worst? Who is the one organization? Because we're going to cover one of them later on too that might be in this discussion. But what's the one organization out of all these bad teams, the ones that are sitting right there in the top? Dallas is included. We'll talk about them later. What's the one job you wouldn't want if you were a hot coach?
I mean, would you want to clash with Aaron Rodgers and the Jets right now?
Ew.
Like, if you go to New York, how much of that job is actually your job, and how much of that is Aaron Rodgers or Woody Johnson, pulling the strings and not letting you do what you want to do, right? Like, I think when you're a hot head coaching candidate, you want to go to a place where you can be you.
Yeah.
And I don't think you can do that with Aaron Rodgers still there. So if this is his last go-around, and, that's a separate conversation, but if this is his last go-around, then my answer would probably change. But, they traded for Devontae for a reason. I don't think it was a good reason, but they did it. And that's one of the main examples of, like, if you're a coach and you don't want that deal, but Aaron says, hey, that's my guy, let's bring him in, you're getting overruled by the quarterback. And I don't think that's any job someone would want.
No, it's not. And you know what? When I asked that question, KO, I forgot all about the Jets and the mess that is up there. And that's why I made that stinky face, because it's like, oh, my God. I was thinking about jobs like New Orleans where they have like negative $9,000 million under the salary cap for another reason. They kept they said they kicked that can down. They say salary cap ain't real. It's real in New Orleans this year, brother. There ain't nothing they can do now. It's like, I want to see them kick that can, but the Jaguars are a mess. Carolina probably has the worst owner. And then the one I was thinking about too, who the hell wants to play for Jerry in Dallas? Who wants to coach that team? I mean, it's just like, these bad teams just keep doing this stuff, going round and round and round. And we thought the Bears, everyone talks about Ryan Poles like he's done a great job for the most part, getting pieces. And Ian Cunningham, his assistant, is probably one of the hottest names in terms of going to be a GM somewhere else. But this is a bad look right here, man, for everybody involved, man, because Caleb Williams is turning out to look like everything that people who were critical of him in the draft process talked about. And that's a whole nother narrative in and of itself. And I know somewhere that kid in Pittsburgh, Justin Fields, is like, what I tell you. See what I tell you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's doing that Shannon Sharp. He's going like,
see,
you see, it wasn't me. It wasn't me the whole time, and now you're dealing with it. So they need to figure out something fast.
All right, Tua and the Dolphins go out and get a big win out in LA last night on Monday Night Football. We'll discuss that with KO here on Locked On NFL. Make sure you hang out for just a second. Today's show is brought to you and sponsored by Ultimate Pro Football GM. Hey, man, this is one of my favorite games to play. I use it on my phone. I have the app. You can do it online, offline, when you're in airplane mode, on an aircraft, all of that stuff. All of the fans from around the league. Our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM, they're back, and they added an amazing new game mode that I got to tell you about. The game that has you step into the shoes of an actual football franchise GM and lead it to glory now has a new head coach career mode. So on top of you getting to build your dynasty team, which I failed at twice last year, signing free agents and hiring staff, now you can get to call offensive plays during the games as well. I'm telling you, man, it's so much fun. You'll realize just how hard this is to build a team, especially with the salary cap, right? It's completely free also. It has no ads, 100% playable offline, playing on the go as you want or when you want to. And here's a special offer for Locked On fans, use the promo code Locked On NFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as the perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you want in creating a dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com, ultimate-gm.com, or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Got to let you know about today's sponsor also, and that is FanDuel, man, because everybody knows FanDuel is the absolute truth. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a little hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Rocking it out with my man KO, Kevin Ostracker, here on Locked On NFL. Look, we talked about the Bears making a change. There was some talk going into last night's game that if the Dolphins lost this game, and Ross Jackson and I previewed this yesterday, that if the Dolphins lost this game, that there were going to be bigger discussions about Mike McDaniel, the coach. Did you think Mike McDaniel had something to prove with this game last night? They ended up winning the game 23-15 against the Rams, who were fighting in that wild division in the NFC West. The Dolphins are now 3-6. Some people think it's good. Some people think, whatever. They ain't going to the playoffs anyway. What do you think about Miami?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think they're going to the playoffs. I mean, I guess they can go on a run and win, all their games but one and sneak into that. Because the AFC, there's an opportunity for teams, in a better AFC, we're not talking about the Bengals as a playoff team still, potentially. We're not talking about the Dolphins as a playoff team. There are still some teams that can make up some ground, but I think a lot of people had stuff to prove. McDaniel being one of them. I think that Tyreek Hill had something to prove. I know people kind of been talking about him. Is he the same player? And he revealed he's dealing with a wrist ligament tear, so he went out there and scored a touchdown. Other guys too. I mean, Tua, I'm sure, wanted to prove something, and I mean, Miami got the win.
Yep.
But, I'm sure they feel like they could play a little bit better. I mean, I'm sure Jalen Waddle, and by the way, I lost by 0.04 in fantasy this past week because Jalen Waddle had 55 yards on the first drive and then had 1 net yard the rest of the game. And I lost by 0.04. So shout out to Jalen Waddle for the worst beat I've ever taken in fantasy. But I'll tell you, Miami's a team that, you look at their roster on paper and you're like, that's a pretty good roster. They have a lot of talent on there. But it just hasn't translated. I know you and I talked about this a couple of weeks ago about coaches that could potentially be on the hot seat, could potentially be fired. And my surprise one that I put out there, and you had kind of talked about it too, was Mike McDaniel.
Absolutely.
And I think that if Miami doesn't make the playoffs this season, there's a good shot that they might move on and go with someone else. But hey, they got to win, and that's all you can ask for. Now it's a matter of stacking. But the big question now becomes, can they stack those wins?
Yep. Listen to Cal Craft's response after the game last night.
Miami Dolphins are off the schneid with a 23-15 victory over the Los Angeles Rams on Monday Night Football, potentially kicking this season back into gear. I'm Kyle Krabs of Locked On Dolphins, and Miami came into this game in primetime with their season on life support, started fast with an impressive opening drive, going down just their second possession to start a game this season and scoring a touchdown. In the middle of the game, had a bit of a lull for Miami, but down the stretch, the Dolphins managed to do something they have not done for much of this season, which is play complementary football. Critical third down conversions for the Dolphins, holding the Rams to field goals in the red zone instead of touchdowns, recovering an onside kick at the end of the game. And the Dolphins now move to 3-6 with 2 consecutive home games against teams with just a few wins of their own under their own belt, and the Raiders and the Patriots looming up next. What will this season hold that's been filled with ups and downs? We'll find out next week as the Dolphins host the Raiders.
I think they're going to beat the Raiders and they're going to win another game and they're going to be 4-6 and people are going to get real happy. And then you look at their schedule and I think at some point Buffalo comes rolling back down that schedule. And then when that happens, that'll tell you who they are and who they aren't.
Yeah. And I mean, looking at their schedule, the Raiders game look, if they're serious about making the playoffs, you need to beat
Right.
the Raiders. Like, if you don't beat the Raiders, you deserve to not make the playoffs anyway. But
Right.
then it's the Patriots, the Packers, the Jets, Texans, 49ers, Browns, and Jets again.
Oh,
I would expect them to win against the Raiders and the Patriots.
Mhm.
Packers, that's a little bit of a tough
I
one.
think they can beat the Jets.
Yeah, the way the Jets are playing, they should win both those games. The Texans, CJ Stroud looks like he's come back down to earth a little bit. Cleveland, you should beat Jameis Winston and that crew. So I'm not counting Miami out. I don't think it's likely they make the playoffs, but I'm not saying their season is over yet because I think there are multiple paths that they can take to make the playoffs with the way the AFC is right now.
They got to go 6-2.
Yep, I agree.
They got to get to 9-8 if they plan on making it. One of those teams that's in their way that we know ain't gonna win the division, but they're 6-3 are the Chargers. They keep rolling along, man. They just like not even a little engine that could. They're like that Big Mac truck. They just keep going and just taking names and playing all physical. And they're a good-looking team, and their fans are real enthusiastic. As a matter of fact, I want you to hear Daniel Wade from Locked On Chargers.
The Chargers started slow in a trap game against the Titans, but they turned things around and pulled away in the second half. This is Daniel Wade here from Locked On Chargers, and my favorite part of the 27-17 win was the Chargers' run game, who ran for almost 150 yards in this one. Gus Edwards looked better than we've seen him all season coming back from injured reserve, 10 carries for 55 yards, but it was the Chargers quarterback who was getting involved on the ground as well. A pivotal 4th and 1 in the first half after they had failed to get into the end zone in their first 2 red zone trips. Justin Herbert takes it himself, and they never looked back. He has been insane for a month now. 14 of 18 in this game. 3 of those passes that were incomplete hit his receiver's hand. 4 straight games of 8.7 yards per attempt or higher. He is insane. And the Chargers defense, after allowing an easy touchdown early, ended up getting 7 sacks in this one and dominating as we thought they would. And the Chargers are playing their best ball with the hardest part of their schedule coming up. But for the full game recap, make sure to check out the Locked On Chargers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
I want to know, man. I wish it was one of those things, KO, where I could jump ahead. I want to know what their record ends up being, bro. I want to know if they're going to win 12 games this year, and people are still going to be sitting there saying, "Oh, they ain't that good. They ain't good." You got to watch teams like this. I told people about them in Pittsburgh. I know you don't want him to talk about Pittsburgh like that, but I told people about him in Pittsburgh. You got to watch teams now that when teams figure out who they are and they don't have an ego to try to be something they're not, they're dangerous. And they can make you play the game their way, and they can beat you at any given point because they use physicality. They don't have to ramp up their physicality. That's who they are when they wake up in the morning. The Chargers are one of those teams.
And I think that's kind of a lost art in today's game where, teams have moved away from that physicality aspect. And then when there's a team that goes out and just hits you in the mouth off the jump, teams are like, whoa.
Yep.
Whoa, what's going on here? And that kind of set the tone. You're right.
I ain't packed clothes for all this foolishness. You know what I mean? I ain't got no outfit for this type of rigmarole y'all got going on. And that's what they do, man. They make you feel real uncomfortable every single week. And they have the ability, if they want to, they can open up and let the quarterback throw it 40 times.
Yeah, they got their bathing suit out and their summer clothes, and then you step outside and it's 25 degrees, and you're like, hold on. When was this established? When did we start doing this?
Yeah, I didn't know we were going over there, and I didn't bring no cash either because they're always ready, man. Because they don't have to get ready; they stay ready. Pittsburgh's like that. Baltimore is like that for the most part. Their defense isn't doing it a lot this year, but Philly's the same thing over in the NFC. It's the same single thing. The Kansas City Chiefs have kind of turned into that too. I know somebody who hasn't turned into that. Dallas is a soap opera, man. It is a hot mess out in Big D. You got Michael Parsons, got CeeDee Lamb talking about the sun, Jerry Jones talking about we're going to tear the stadium down, and Mike McCarthy may be out. We're going to talk about more of the mess in Dallas, and we'll do that in just a second here on Locked On NFL. Got to let y'all know about Game Time, man. It is the place you need to be going when you're trying to buy tickets to anything, any sporting event, any play, all of that stuff. the first thing you do is take all of the foolishness out and download the Game Time app. Now I'm going to tell you what you're going to get. You're going to get a curation process that's going to get all that fluff out of the way, stuff that you're not interested in, and they're going to go right to and zip right to the things that you're interested in. All in pricing, seat views, the lowest price guarantee. And then if you get there late after the event starts, ain't nobody going to tell you that you're wrong for being late. They're going to help you get your ticket so you can get in and don't miss more of the action. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use the code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKEDON NFL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, Kevin Ostracker, rolling along. He's the local expert guest today, as always, here on Locked On NFL on Tuesdays. Dallas. We got to get to Dallas, man. Dallas is, well, let's just say there's a new thing every day for somebody to be upset about, or it's like the best reality TV show to everybody who's not a Cowboy fan in the whole world. The Cowboy fans probably wish we were talking about football, but we're not. We're talking about Zeke. Zeke's been sounding off. Zeke's been doing everything but looking like Zeke of old since he got back to Dallas. I want you to hear what the boys from Locked On Cowboys has to say.
Rather than letting your best running back get a touch inside the 5-yard line, you go right back to Ezekiel Elliott. And I think it was David Hellman that pointed out on Twitter that last year, Hunter Lipke fumbled in the Miami game in the first quarter.
That's right.
Never got a touch the rest of the season.
How do you fumble the ball after Dowdle got you all the way down there and is working his butt off and has earned the right, honestly, to be the one actually carrying the ball down there? How do you swap out Zeke and then have him go out and fumble the ball and then turn around and do it again? Like, who cares, man? Get him out of there and let Dowdle do the job. When Lipke fumbled that ball, it wasn't just like he didn't get the next series. They went and got Zeke for this because they didn't feel like they could trust Lipke because he fumbled that one time. Like, that's ridiculous. This should be Lipke's job right now. Cut Zeke, give those carries to Lipke, and let this be a duo between Lipke and Dowdle.
Yeah, they about had it with Ezekiel Elliott in Dallas, man. And this was another miscalculation by Jerry Jones, of course, when everyone knows that there were people out there, there were players out there available. One is Derrick Henry, and I know you're glad he's in Baltimore and not running around in Fort Worth somewhere. But still, this is just more mess from Jerry Jones, which is why we were talking about jobs earlier. This is the one that I was saying I wouldn't go anywhere near it.
Yeah, it feels like there is something every single day with this team. And now Dak is done for the season. I mean, McCarthy's all but gone at this point. There's no way that they can bring him back. And then it becomes, well, who would it be? Like, I know, is Bill Belichick an option there? Or would they bring in some young play caller? You know, but then you have the problem of like, well, Dak is under contract and a whole lot of money for a lot of years. And it's kind of like, what direction do you even go? Because the calling card of that team is the offensive line, and they've been bad for most of the season. I mean, the run game hasn't been able to get going. The defense has 1.5 players on it with, Micah Parsons being the star and then I guess Trevon Diggs. But other than that, they don't really have anybody. They haven't been able to put a viable wide receiver 2 next to CeeDee Lamb really over the course of his career. It just feels like thing after thing after thing. And on top of it all, they lost in the wild card last year in embarrassing fashion. I mean, that was embarrassing what Green Bay did to them in their home stadium. And they still kind of looked at that and said, oh, we'll run it back. We'll see what happens. And it's kind of like you waste a year. And that to me grinds my gears, because you're like, if something isn't working, it's not working. But don't just continue to go. I mean, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. That is what Dallas and a lot of teams do. And it's like you're wasting a year, even if you don't have like the star-studded roster you need to win a Super Bowl. You have stars on a roster that you're wasting a year of. And I don't know. It doesn't sit right with me.
It doesn't sit right with me either, man. And for a long time, I thought the Cowboys had a surplus of pass rushers. And I thought that those are the guys that they should have used. Maybe this was 2 years ago with Dorrance Armstrong and all of these dudes. They should have used those guys as pieces. in order to be able to go out and fortify their draft capital. But they're always chasing that it factor. And like right now, Stephen A. Smith came out and said that they should hire Coach Prime and then use the first pick to draft Shador. Once again, chasing the it factor. Not that Coach Prime isn't a good coach and not that Shador isn't going to be a good quarterback, but just the thought of suggesting that that's what Dallas needs, to me, it's the total opposite of what they need. I think they're going to probably end up taking Travis Hunter if they end up at number 1 and then try to get an offensive lineman later. If you take Shador Sanders at number 1, what are you going to do with Dak? And everyone says trade him. Did they give him a whole bunch of cash already? Because then that now accelerates into the cap and it makes it even almost impossible for him to trade. And I know at one point he had a no trade clause. Does he have it again? So yeah, it's a lot of stuff about that situation that just doesn't make sense. And a lot of people commenting about it don't make a lot of sense about it either. One team that I was real high on coming into this year was, well, not high on coming into this year, but cautiously optimistic, was Atlanta. Most people didn't understand what they did with their quarterback situation. They're all quiet now because it's working with Kirk Cousins. And now they also have in-house a young kid who they can develop, as a first-round pick, that they can develop, and they picked them in the top 10 last year, and they can hold on to him for a while. But you can't get so happy that you start looking too far ahead, because they did something the other day I didn't think they were going to do. They lost to one of those bad teams, their rivals, the Saints. And if anything, this is for positioning in the playoffs. They're going to win the division, but you can't be losing to the Saints, man, when you're trying to still make that leap to the next level. Listen to my man from Locked On Falcons, and he's going to break it down. Right? Freeman's going to break it down for you here real quick about how disappointing of a loss this was.
The Falcons fall flat, suffer their first division loss to the Saints in Week 10. I'm Aaron Freeman with Locked On Falcons. The Falcons suffered their first loss in the NFC South in a 20-17 loss to the Saints in Week 10 in a mostly flat performance. Saints got an early spark from interim head coach Darren Rizzi, and the Falcons were unable to match it, falling to 5-1 in the division and 6-4 overall. Falcons failed to take advantage of frequent opportunities in this game, with 3 uncharacteristic missed field goals from kicker Younghoe Koo, an off day from Kirk Cousins, who threw for 306 yards but had no touchdowns and had a costly late game interception. The team hopes to regroup as they travel next week to Denver to take on the Broncos. For more coverage of the Falcons, stay Locked On Falcons, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
That game in Denver is not easy. Okay, and they better be lucky that the Bucs have some injuries, because the Bucs are playing real well right now with a bunch of banged up people that's not available. They mess around and let them get healthy, and they keep losing these games that they should win. Atlanta's going to get caught, and they're going to have nobody to blame but themselves.
Yeah, I mean, you have to establish good regular season habits. These games from a record perspective even matter when you talk about seeding, right? We talked about, that division is theirs, right? There's no question about it. But, do you want to go in as the 3 seed or the 4 seed, 2 seed or the 4 seed? Like, that can matter in the grand scheme of things. So I think, to me, Atlanta just has to find ways to establish habits. And when your kicker misses 3 field goals and you look to a playoff scenario, it's like, well, that's a lot more high pressure and high leverage than, a Week 10 game in the beginning of November. So I still think Atlanta's a good team. I don't think necessarily they're going to win the Super Bowl this season, but I think it's for reasons like this why I don't think they will, because you have to get those habits in. And it's just tough because the NFC right now, there are a lot of good teams there. Obviously, everybody's looking at Detroit, even though Goff had his 5 interception day. The Lions come back and win that game. Like, that's the mark of a good team, not, you lose to a team that's the first game for an interim head coach and, they have all these issues. That's not the making of a team that can win the Super Bowl.
It is not. So looking at it, and I have the standings pulled up here, the Falcons, they only have a 2-game lead over the Bucs, which is really a 3-game lead because I think they already beat that. They have the division, they're up 4-1. The division record is 4-1. The Bucs are 1-2. So if they play them head to head and they lose to them, then those 2 losses, they can make that 2-loss difference up real quick and put them in a situation where they can be in a tie with 1 more game. So they got to be real careful, man, and make sure that they don't allow Tampa Bay to kind of do the moonwalk and walk backwards and catch them while they're stuck in sand, losing games to people like the New Orleans Saints of all people. You make sure you tune in again tomorrow for Locked On NFL as my man Tyler Rowland wakes up in the AM and gives you a double shot of espresso using local experts to give you all the information from your favorite teams around the league, and then slide back through here on the barbershop on Locked On NFL twice a day. All right, you get me, the barber, Tony Wiggins, and we run it down just like we just did. For my man, Kevin R. Stryker, he'll be back next Tuesday. I am Tony Wiggins. You guys take care of yourself, and we'll see you next time.